A trial is underway today for a man accused of leading police on a chase and then crashing into a squad car. Christopher Brugger Jr. allegedly slammed into that Madison police cruiser back in September and injured the police officer inside and his K9. WMTV's Ashley Wheel has been following this case very closely since the incident happened all those months ago. She joins us now live in the studio with the latest. And Ashley, what happened this morning in court so far?
The jury trial began today, and as the court heard opening arguments from both sides, Brugger faces more than a dozen felony charges as well as multiple misdemeanors and several traffic violations. Representing the prosecutor's assistant district attorney, Andrea Raymond, she detailed that much of the interactions police had with Brugger were on camera through dash cams and body cams. She also stated that the suspect tested positive for meth. Raymond also shared that Madison police officer Ryan Kimberly, who was severely hurt in the crash, will be able to testify during the trial.
He'll also tell you that he doesn't remember much of the actual crash itself or that incident that day. But he'll tell you about the impacts that those injuries have had on him, on his life, and his career.
The defense argues that some of the charges are not relevant to the situation. His attorney encourages the courtroom to pay attention to details while watching back those videos.
Pay attention to how close people actually are to each other. What is the order of events there? Is Mr. Brugger being reckless, or is he taking a reasonable, predictable action in a parking lot?
The trial began this morning at 8:30 and is set to last up for 4 days. We also have the 911 calls from that chaotic day back in September. Tune in tonight on WMTV 15 News at 5 and 6 to hear that audio. Reporting live in studio, Ashley Wheel, WMTV 15 News.